right, welcome back once again, everybody. I'm Don Seifert. It's the Dr. Tree Fruit and Don podcast. I'm here with Dr. Kari Peter. Say hi, Kari.
Hi there.
And Dr. Greg Krawczyk. Say hi, Greg.
Hello, everyone.
Dr. Sean Kumar will be joining us here in a bit, but he is still currently without power up at State College, so he is a little behind. Kari, I'll let you go first. I know you've got probably quite the update with the weather coming up, so
Yes, it is a bit bonkers. So every day my advice changes based on what the weather is. And I will tell you, so at the beginning of the week, I didn't think things were going to be too bad this week, but today, well, it's looking pretty crazy with regards to what the disease prediction is going to be and the disease forecast and the forecast in general. So it looks like starting later today, possibly, it's saying for at least for our area in Adams County, 69% chance of precipitation. And then all next week, we're in for a very tricky period. So where to start? Well, first, let's start with fire blight. I do know in south central PA and even east of here, and I'm sure in other parts of, I probably from the middle of the state downward, southward, and maybe even the northeast corner, we are in bloom. So we're in different degrees of bloom. If you have any bloom, you will want to get out with a streptomycin spray if you already have not done so in the last 24 hours. This infection event, this forecasted infection event is going to be severe. And so, how do I determine severity? Well, I use, as I've mentioned many times before, I use Mary Blight to determine the infection risk potential. And so Mary Blight takes into consideration the minimum and maximum temperature during the day. It takes into consideration when if the blossoms are open, the bacteria is present, and also if there's a wetting event. And so based on the temperature, you degree hours will be calculated. So if you're over a certain number of degree hours at a certain temperature, in this case, it's like 60, 65 degrees and about, I believe, 198 degree hours. This triggers that variable, that sort of heat unit variable, making it a positive variable that contributes to the risk factor. So anything over 100, I do worry about, but the risk isn't extreme at 100. Anything over 150, yes, we need to take it seriously. Anything over 200, infection is going to happen. Someone's going to get infection. And so for right now in Adams County, I am seeing an EIP of 242 for Friday, which is pretty significant. And so what I'm recommending here at Biglerville, and I'm recommending to folks listening, and I'm recommending to folks who are participating in our spring meetings, which have started this week, is that if you have bloom, make sure you get a streptomycin spray on today or first thing tomorrow morning if you already have not done so, to kill whatever is in in those flowers right now. Because in the last week or so, lots of blossoms have opened. We still have blossoms open. Bees are flying around. We've had good conditions for pollinators. So the bees have been flying around, able to deposit unwittingly bacteria in those flowers. The bacteria has been growing, and because of the warm temperatures. So we need to clean up those flowers, and you do it with a streptomycin spray. And there's not really a substitute for streptomycin, even the other antibiotics that are available. So I really highly, highly advise people to go out there with a streptomycin spray, tank mixed with an adjuvant. And also, it wouldn't hurt to add something like Actigard or another plant defense elicitor to that mix, because Actigard will turn on the plant's immune system, and that does a good job of sort of holding back the disease severity should it occur, should the disease occur in the plant. Also, you may want to think about adding to that tank mix Kudos or Apogee. That's the prohexadione calcium. That will harden off the shoots in 10 to 14 days. If you're using that, just make sure you use a water conditioner with it, because our water is harder than a brick around here, and there's lots of calcium. And there's calcium in prohexadione calcium in Apogee and Kudos, so you don't want the water and the calcium tying up the calcium in the product. So you will be hardening off those shoots, which will limit shoot blight later on. And so that takes 10 to 14 days. So that's when symptoms are probably going to be showing up. I'm already seeing symptoms in my experimental block, very early symptoms, where I inoculated them a week and a half ago. So we've had good conditions where I am seeing disease already in my orchard block that I've inoculated. So, in this, I looked at NUA across the state, from State College southward, where I could access the NUA stations, the west, the southwest, the south central, the southeast, and everything is going to be high for fire blight infection. Now, that's if the rain comes to fruition. So if it doesn't rain, the fire blight infection won't be triggered, but I have a feeling it's going to rain. So please, please, please take this seriously. Even if you are legit in petal fall, but if you still have blossoms out there, those blossoms are vulnerable. So I am personally put in the crest to have several of my blocks with another round of strep because I see lots of blossoms open. And so heed this warning. I will also be sending out a disease update via Fruit Times in the next 24 hours. I'm planning to hopefully get it finished today, and hopefully we'll get out either later today or first thing tomorrow. So as far as even reinforcing it. Okay, so that's fire blight. What else do we need to worry about with the rain? Apple scab and apple blotch, or Marsanina blotch, as you've probably heard me talk about it. Scab spores are still high at this period. We're still sort of in that peak zone, even though they are dropping off. So this is also would be a good scab infection event with this rain coming. So frac group 3 and frac group 7 are the fungicides I want to be seeing, as well as frac group 9. So what would those products be? We're talking about Aprovia, Excalia, Fontellus, Miravis, Tesseris, Luna Tranquility, Luna Flex. Those all have frac group 7s. Frac group 7s, they're SDHIs, they're excellent against scab, and they're also excellent against apple blotch. So we're also, so as scab is starting to drop off with spores, Marsanina blotch or apple blotch spores are starting to jack up with regards to dispersal. So the best products that manage apple blotch, and if the forecast comes to fruition, we're going to have warm temperatures and extended wetting event, and this is going to be perfect for Marsanina, absolutely perfect. And so frac group 3 and frac group 7 are excellent for both of these diseases, especially Marsanina blotch. And so think about also rotating products. So 7s are your go-to, but you could rotate with Sevia or the highest rate of Indar, Inspire Super, Scala, Vanguard, and even Axios. Axios is very good against scab, and that is a unique mode of action of frac group 52. So there's a lot going on. The last thing I want to mention is I am seeing powdery mildew pop up in a lot of orchards, especially in susceptible varieties. It doesn't surprise me because we've had such dry stretches. So what can you do to shut that down? There's lots of products, but if you want to go to the cheap route, use sulfur. Sulfur will shut that down fast. And sulfur is an excellent powdery mildew material. And we're seeing it on our own farm here at Freck. So I've mentioned to the farm manager, I said, let's shut it down. Use 10 pounds of sulfur to the acre. And that should shut things down with powdery mildew. You can use stronger products like Torino or Gatton. Those are powdery mildew only products. And some of those frac 7s are also good for powdery mildew as well. So you're getting a little more bang for your buck with disease control as far as that's broad spectrum nature. And then finally, I just want to say with regards to, I've talked about a lot of these single modes of actions. Don't forget to tank mix with mancozeb, a rain-fast mancozeb at this time as well. So make sure that you are keeping your spray intervals tight. And the people who I'm talking to about spray interval tightness are those who insist on using alternate row middle. So we're having if it comes to fruition, a long stretch. It looks like it to be like a possible 7-day stretch. Do not take chances with those spray intervals because you might get caught off guard. And especially depending on how much rain is falling. Again, the forecast is all over the place right now, but we could possibly see a couple inches if the forecast comes to fruition in the coming week. And yes, we do need this rain. I'm excited if it does come to fruition because we're very dry. The state's on fire. So this would definitely help those conditions. But just be mindful of what you're putting on your spray interval and then how long the last time that spray was and how much rain has fallen. So yeah, so those are the big guns right now. Fire blight, apple scab marsanina blotch coming up with regards to this potential rain, and the dry conditions with powdery mildew has been very favorable. As far as the stone fruit goes, I would be concerned about cherry leaf spot on sour cherries, so folks should have some kind of fungicide. Again, whatever controls for apple scab is also going to control for cherry leaf spot. With regards to peaches and nectarines and powdery mildew or rusty spot, so that's powdery mildew on the fruit, petal fall, shuck split, first cover, second cover is when you need to control for that fungus. And again, whatever is controlling for powdery mildew in apple is going to control it in stone fruit. As far as brown rot, if you're using sulfur to control for powdery mildew in your stone fruit, that's going to take care of damping down or tamping down the brown rot spores that are out there. But we're really not in brown rot conditions right now, so that's a lot as far as thinking about things. As far as just for a quick mention about organic control for a lot of these diseases with fire blight. Huh. Um, don't use copper unless you're using a soluble copper like the CS 2005, like copper sulfate pentahydrate. That's probably your best option for copper. If you've got blossom protect, that's another option to control in with regards to protecting your blossoms and preventing the bacteria getting into the nectaries. As far as plant defense elixers, you can use Vasoplant or Lifeguard to help the plant immune system to prevent against fire blight. As far as the diseases go, sulfur is probably your best bet for Marsanina blotch and apple scab. And I will say for people who don't think about apple scab because they're growing a resistant variety, a scab resistant variety, well, you need to worry about Marsanina blotch because those scab resistant varieties are not resistant to apple blotch. So you must use sulfur on those scab resistant varieties if you're choosing to farm organically with your operation. So you got to get out there with sulfur, and I would recommend to do it in the next 48 hours or less to get those trees covered up because this could be a significant apple blotch, Marsanina blotch infection period coming up. And so I think that's it. Questions, Don? Anything confusing? Makes sense?
No,
Overwhelming?
everything seems to make sense.
Yeah.
Um,
If you're feeling whiplash, folks, I'm feeling whiplash because it's like every day is different with regards to the disease condition, potential for disease conditions. And I really am not confident until like within 24 hours. So
I think
that's where we're at.
I think that's a good point
Yeah.
about the not counting on the weather until just before.
Yeah. And I'm not comfortable with that, but that's the reality we are in right now. So,
Oh,
I,
sorry, go ahead.
oh, that's it. Yeah.
Um, it's been exceptionally windy for some of us the last
Yes.
couple weeks. Obviously, we're not supposed to be spraying if things are just going to carry right off of the trees. Um, what are some pieces of advice you have if, hey, I really, really desperately need to get something on, but I don't have a great timing window to do it because it's been 20-mile-an-hour winds?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I don't have an easy answer for that because we're in the same boat here at the station. And so you can do your best with regards to adding drift retardants to your tank mix to sort of help lessen that, but 20-mile-an-hour wind and drift are sort of two different things almost. And so do the best you can as far as trying to identify when the wind's at the lowest for anyone who uses Weather Underground or some of these other apps that show you when the potential for wind is going to be at the lowest. So you could use that to sort of time your sprayings. And I've looked at that often too, looking at the day and just seeing when the wind is going to potentially be in the single digits to be able to spray. Sometimes that's first thing in the morning or the middle of the night, but middle of the day or early evening has been pretty terrible with wind lately.
Yeah.
So it's just, I would say, utilize technology to sort of nail down a time when the forecasted wind is going to be at its lowest windiness. So
Yeah.
that's probably the best advice I can give because
No,
that's
that
what we're
is.
doing here at the station.
If I can add here
Yes.
something,
Yeah, please do.
uh, I, I don't have any good recipe, but I want to point out a lot of pesticide labels have the restrictions when they cannot be used based on the wind speed. So be careful about this.
And that's an excellent point. Review the label as far as those restrictions. Remember, the label's the law.
And again, it's not that label will help you lower the wind or get a better coverage, but certain products should not be used based on the label when the wind exceeds certain speed.
That's a good
Yeah.
point. Yeah, a
Yeah,
good reminder.
I know for over here in Berks it's been rough at times to try and figure out when to actually do those sprays just because it feels like it's been constant.
And
But
we're yeah. I mean, we were in very northeastern Lancaster County, and the wind was vicious the other night. It was
Yeah.
very windy on Tuesday night. And
So,
that there was
awesome.
and that there was that major system coming through as well. So there's not an easy answer, unfortunately.
Yeah. Uh, but yeah, Greg, thanks for that point. And if you want to give your update, your floor's yours.
okay, thank you, Dan. Well, I mean, with insects, I think the story is a little bit simpler. Not necessarily easier, but simpler from the point that the rain is not really influencing that much the insect development. It's really mostly about the temperature. So, saying this, uh, we are basically in this period when the most important pests are oriental fruit moth, plum curculio, European apple sawfly, persilla. Those are the pests that need to be thinking, that people need to think about at this moment. Uh, Plum curculio and oriental fruit moth are right now the main targets when you use any insecticides on peaches. And again, I understand that, insecticides applications are not going separately from the fungicides application. So very rarely. So whenever you're gonna decide that you're spraying peaches today, remember that we are right now at this moment today, we're at about 40, 50, maybe 60% egg hatch for oriental fruit moth. And the trees are ripe for infestation by this pest. I mean, we have growing terminals, we have tiny fruit, oriental fruit moth, that's what they love. Plum curculio, they are moving into the orchard and they will keep moving into the orchard for at least another 2, 3 weeks. So basically, when you spray something right now on peaches, you're trying to control oriental fruit moth that is already there. You're trying to control plum curculio, which is already there. However, plum curculio have this tendency that it will keep moving to the peaches for another 2, 3 weeks. The products to use, there's nothing new. There is really no new insecticide that we want to talk about. Uh, the standard products, Avant, Assail, Avant at 6 ounces, or Avant Evo also at 6 ounces. Assail at least 6 ounces, probably 8 would be better. And maybe Imidan, but you have to remember about the restrictions with Imidan, how soon you can actually move back to the orchard if there is any need for the shorter re-entry. Saying this, on apples, depends from the location, depends from the orchards, depends from the cultivar. I mean, some trees are already at petal fall, and some trees are still in bloom, and they might be in bloom for another 2 weeks. I mean, the weather with the lower weather, I don't know. I mean, there's no guarantee. The point is that at petal fall on apple, you cannot spray any insecticides when the trees are still in bloom. This is very important. Kari already mentioned our meeting in Lancaster County where it was very windy, it really felt very cold and so on. And when I walk through this orchard, I have seen wild pollinators still being on apples at 7, 8 p.m. It was, I didn't expect them how cold it was, but they were still there, still looking for the flowers. So be careful with when you spray, what you spray, and what stage are the trees in at the moment. We really should not spray anything that is still in bloom, and this also includes dandelions in the ground cover. I mean, remember that spraying trees, a lot of residue go to the all weeds under the trees, and there are still flowers there. They still be utilized by those wild pollinators, wild bees, or even honeybees. So really, really be careful about it. The petal fall on apples, if that's what you think you're gonna do next with the insecticides, should include something that will control the remaining of the oriental fruit moth, plum curculio, potentially European apple sawfly. All three of them can be controlled using the same amount assail imidan. But you also might think about European red mites, and this will be a good time to use again agrimec on apples. Maybe something, like Apollo, like Savi, something like this. If you had some mite problem, you didn't do any oil or anything like this. And then you also have to think about when will be the next time you're gonna spray. Why I'm saying this, codling moth had the biofix this past Monday, the April 28th. The first application against codling moth should be done at about 250 degree days after the biofix. Uh, with the temperatures, with the forecasted temperatures for the next week, we will be accumulating plus minus 10, 15 degree days a day. So saying this, we may not be at the right time for controlling codling moth in 2 weeks. I'm assuming we will, because it's usually 10 to 14 days after the biofix when we're reaching those 250 degree days. But in order to be effective, you really have to think about what the weather is, when the codling moth started flying at your location. Maybe go to NUA, check the NUA, find the nearest weather station to your location, and then use NUA for this decision. Again, codling moth timing is about 250 degree days after biofix. And for us, for FREC, biofix was on Monday, April 28th. Uh, Another thing to worry about right now is Persilla. This is a perfect time to control Persilla on pears. Uh, Looking at the not generic but the brand name products, Agrimec or Agriflex are your best option. Agrimec is only Agrimec. Agriflex actually is Agrimec plus Actara. Actara is extremely toxic to bees, but Actara also will help with controlling stuff like stink bugs, will help controlling stuff like aphids. So And this is the same also on apples. So remember that if you go with the AgriFlex, I think the rate is 8.5 ounces in 100 gallons. Then you're also gonna control aphids. You're also gonna control mites on apples. And on pears, it's basically you're targeting Persilla. Another thing to remember is white peach scale. I would say, and again, I mean, I got this amazing video from Pittsburgh area the other day when I had two videos shot within a few hours from each other. One was before the storm that they got, another one was after. And looking at the trees went from being in the full bloom to almost full petal fall just over the time period because of the storm that they got in Pittsburgh. Again, it's not really about how fast the petal fall come on apples, because you remember the white peach scale, the timing that I really recommend is to spray at petal fall on apples. It's about biology of the insects. This is the most effective time. This is when the crawlers for white peach scales are present. And this is why this is the petal fall on apples. So when to spray? Well, I would say in about within the next 10, 14 days is the best time to go and try to control white peach scale if you need to control it. The products, Senstar, Esteem, Centaur, Movento, any one of them will work and will help. Uh, Movento will also help control green peach aphids if that's something that you're also trying to control. This is the beginning of the green peach aphid. They will start showing up. I got one report that, oh yeah, we already see the green peach aphids. I mean, the best time is to go at about shock split timing. So this will be, if you need to do. A sail also will control green peach aphid. A Vount will not control green peach aphid. So if you're going after Curculio oriental fruit moth with a sail, you are taking care of green peach aphid. If you're going with a Vount, then this pest is not affected. So that's really all for this week. Again, we'll see how they develop. Next week, we're gonna go to northern part of the state. I mean, we're going back to basically Lancaster Bergs. We're going to the Lucerne County, I believe, wherever the Green's Orchard is, and we also will be in State College at Harner's farm for the Twilight meeting. So we might have additional updates. So that's all what I have at the moment.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. Sean, say hi to everybody. Thanks for being able to join us here today.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. Thanks, Don and Kari, for having me here. Do you want me to go ahead with my thing?
Yeah, please feel free. I'm glad you were able to get in and looks like you got some power on. So
Yes, we have power in all of Penn State's main campus, and everywhere outside it is still out. I'll start with the phenology report. So as Kari and Greg probably mentioned, we are at petal fall for most varieties in Adams County. Some varieties still have their secondary bloom that's blooming, but most of your kings and first laterals are all in petal fall or way past petal fall. Some at 5 to I even saw 8 millimeters in fruitlet size for some of your varieties in Adams County. So this is thinning time. Get your sprayers out and get to work with thinning your different varieties based on the stages they're at. At Berks, we are at petal fall again for all of the varieties that we tested. And in Center County, we are anywhere from post bloom to early petal fall. depending on the variety. And in Lawrence, in Western Pennsylvania, we are at full bloom or early petal fall, similar stage to where we are at Center County. So with the hot weather that we have this week, things are moving quite quickly. And especially in Adams County, we have really good weather yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And so this is peak thinning season. So if you have good weather for thinning, and if you're debating between doing it this week or waiting until next week for Adams County, I would say since you have the good weather, go on and do it this week, even if your apples are somewhat on the smaller side, say anywhere from 6 to 8 millimeters instead of the regular 10 to 12 millimeters where you usually thin. And that 10 to 12 millimeters is coming sometime early next week. But looking at the weathers, we have some cool overcast weather as well next week, and some rains here and there. So if you are at 6 to 8 millimeters and today is a beautiful day for thinning, go ahead and thin your crop today and tomorrow. And when using products like Etrel, for example, just be careful with 80 plus Fahrenheit. You don't want to completely remove stuff from your trees, especially Etrel ethafon, things like that. But again, we don't use that until later, so we are fine. And for small fruited varieties like Gala, it's always good to use 6BA product like Maxell, Exilis, things like that. And so which also helps with fruit sizing as well, and helps with cell division right after petal fall, when you want the cells to divide and then expand in size later in the season. So for varieties like Kayla, it's good to use 6BA, and this week is a perfect time to use that. We have 75 plus 80 plus weather. 6BA works well then. And so use your Maxell, use your Exilis for thinning Gala and similar small fruited varieties. Now, for large fruited varieties like Honeycrisp and Jonathan and Jonagold, things like that, you want to use NAA. And that again can be refined, Frutone, whatever NAA product you have. And you can use that. And most times you can combine things with Carbaryl or 7, both 6BA and NAA. For good thinning. This week seems like the perfect weather, so you want to get most of your thinning done this week if your apples are between the 6 to 8 millimeters, because they need to be past 5 millimeters for these thinners to have a significant effect if you're targeting fruitlet thinning. If you're targeting a petal fall spray, then yes, still go ahead and do those petal fall sprays, because they're also good with sort of reducing your load before you do another spray at the fruitlet thinning stage. So that's for Adams County. For Berks, Center County, we are probably looking at thinning next week. So you just have to be checking the weather, checking the winds and all of that to make sure that you have a time that you can spray. Ideally, you want a 4 to 6 hour gap after spraying before you have rainfall, especially for thinners, so that the thinners have been activated, and then if you receive rainfall after 4 or 5 hours, then that's fine. Just be careful of continuous overcast weather in your location. If you have that, you could have excessive thinning from your different products. So just be mindful of that when thinking of rates and things like that. And the other thing is a stressed tree will drop more than a tree that's not stressed. So assess the tree health status of your block, particularly if you've had severe drought stress, if you have low return bloom, but you still have to thin, then make sure you reduce your rates a little bit, because it is likely that you'll have a stronger thinning effect on those blocks as compared to the blocks where that didn't have as much of a drought stress. And as far as irrigation, make sure that you have irrigation on, especially at the petal fall stage, because the first 30 days after full bloom is when the cells are dividing. And so you want to have irrigation as much as possible for these varieties that are dividing, as well as when flowers are initiating for Fuji later in the season. in late June, early July, and for Gala, which late July, early August. But for Honeycrisp, this is when the flowers are also initiating, and also the fruits are just starting to grow. So it's good to have them irrigated. And so take care of your growing fruit because it's a cell division phase of that. Is there anything else that I missed?
Not that I can think of. That was pretty comprehensive. No, I think you're squared away.
Got it.
Thanks for that update. Um, does anyone have any? Yeah, Greg.
One thing about sprays with forecasted thunderstorms slash showers slash rain basically every single day in the next 7 days starting from today. We also have to remember about the rain fastness of different products. And again, there is not too much information that tells you, it can be handled 1 inch or 2 inch of the rain or something like this. But generally, when you get a very strong rain in a relatively short time period and so on, anything above 1 inch, 2 inches is too much to retain the product still on the foliage or on the fruit. I mean, maybe there are better information for the fungicides on or the PGRs, but with insecticides, we generally assume that, anything above 1.5 inches of rain after the application will basically wash out most of the residue. So this is something to remember when you're planning the sprays either for diseases or insects or potentially also for the thinning. Because again, it seems like we're gonna be in those 70s for the next week plus, but it also looks like there is a rain, some kind of precipitation in the forecast for every single day, and some of them just say storms, occasional thunderstorms, severe thunderstorms. So who knows how that's gonna look. But remember about the rain fastness of different products. And generally, if the product dry out after application, it is much more rain fastness than much longer rain fastness than if the rain come when the product is still in the wet stage. So this is just a comment without being specific because I don't have a more specific information.
I have more specific information. So, just to follow up with Greg, not all pesticides are created equal with regards to how they penetrate or don't penetrate plant tissue. So, for all the FRAC groups, the single modes of actions, FRAC 7s, 3s, 9s, those typically are considered translaminar fungicides, meaning they will penetrate those first few layers of plant cells to get into the tissue. So this is good in the sense of they are rain fast, in the sense they penetrate. They can also be quote unquote curative, where they can actually, the fungicide can reach a fungal infection that's already in progress inside the plant tissue. But you also, so those are good during really rainy conditions, as long as they're dry and they've had their chance to be able to penetrate, and certain adjuvants will hasten that penetration as well. But with that said, not all the product will get into the plant tissue. You will still have some on the top layer of the plant leaf or fruit. Now that's for like the single modes of action, for the FRAC groups. For like your FRAC 3, 7, 11s, 9s, 52s, etc. Now, your broad spectrum fungicides, this is the fungicides we're talking about, your mancozeb, your captan, your zyram, your sulfur, those are surface only. They are not penetrating the plant tissue. Now, you've often heard me really advocate for rain fast mancozebs. That mancozeb has been formulated to be a stick around more in light of rain events. So it has a stickiness to it where it will stick on the plant tissue and not be easily washed off by rain. It can still be washed off, but it hangs around a lot longer. Uh, Captan is sticky to begin with. So Captan will not be easily washed off very quickly, but it can be washed off because it's on the surface. The same with sulfur. With the insecticides, I know some insecticides do have the ability to penetrate, but I don't know all the specifics of that. That's just based on some research that I've been involved in with insecticides and fungicides and their influence on some pollinators. But it is, I think Greg brings up a good point as far as and I want to make an addendum to what I said about when you're thinking about your sprays, is that when it does rain, think about how much rain has fallen as well, because you won't have that full potency after the rainfall of what you had before you applied it. The fresher the fungicide application, the better as far as the maximum punch. But even with fungicides, there have been, the rule of thumb is anything inch and a half, 2 inches. And there has been some studies on some fungicides in grapes as far as the rain fastness or lack thereof on grape leaves that I've used in talks as far as trying to talk about fungicides, showing that even after 2 inches, you still have a residue there that is still effective. But we haven't done that for every single fungicide or insecticide, and so that's a good point. So when we go through this rain that's coming up, be mindful of what you're applying, which is why I'm always advocating rain-fast mancozebs. They do work. I have done the research on that as far as comparing and contrasting rain-fast mancozeb versus non-rain-fast mancozeb. If you don't have rain-fast mancozeb, say you just have straight pancozeb or another version of mancozeb, you can make it rain fast by adding a spreader sticker to it. It's on the label that you can make it rain fast that way if you don't have access to something like Roper Rain Shield or Manzate Pro Stick or some of those brands that have the rain fastness in their title. So that's a good point from Greg that he brought up. So just be mindful, not everything's created equal as far as what you're putting on your trees.
Most insecticides are not translaminar, and that's why I actually mentioned this. I mean, there are very few that are translaminar. Movento would be Agremec, but the product that we use to control the pest that we mentioned this
It's
time,
on the surface
most
only.
of them, they are only surface products.
Yeah.
Just want to add to that for PGRs. Usually, I looked up the Maxell label. It says 6 hours. So anywhere from usually from 6 to 8 hours, as long as that product has dried on the tree, that should be fine for PGRs. It'll be nice to have slow drying conditions for some of the PGRs, but generally 6 to 8 hours without rain is usually enough for the PGRs to have action. And you are aware that using a product like Seven, for example, like Seven, it does have re-wetting capacity for thinning further. So if you have rainfall after Seven, it does help to thin more. It does thin a little bit more off as compared to when you don't have rainfall after Seven application. So that is just something to keep in mind as well.
All right. Sounds good, everybody. Well, let's get this
Should we
wrapped.
just mention the spring meetings one more time?
The remaining ones?
Yeah,
Sure.
the remaining ones. So tonight, this is May 1st. We're in St. Thomas Andrews Orchards. All the meetings start at 6, just by the way. Next Tuesday, we're in Monton at Brecknock Orchards. On Wednesday, May 7th, we're in Elysburg at Green's Fruit Farm. On May 8th, we're at Harner's Orchards in State College. On May 14th, we are, and I always forget the name, we're in Bulger. And that's Rivendell Farms. That's in Bulger, Pennsylvania. So that's for the West Coast, the Western PA folks. And then finally on May 15th, which Thursday, May 15th, we are in Northeast PA, the Erie County meeting at Birch Fruit Farms. That's a morning meeting, and that one starts at 9:45.
Very good. With that, we will wrap up and I will get this edited so folks can start thinking about their spray schedules.
Good
All right.
advice.
Well, thank you all for jumping on here this morning. Thank you all for listening. Say goodbye, everybody.
See you later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.